Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my channel, The Mysterious One. Here we uncover chilling crimes, unsolved mysteries, and eerie encounters that will keep you questioning what's real. Man, let's dive into today's mystery. So, I came across this video on social media where they were talking about spontaneous human combustion, and I was like kind of taken back by that because I'm like, is this real? Is it a mystery? Like, it definitely is a mystery to me, and I have so many questions, and I have notes. Um, but I was like, spontaneous human combustion. I'm like, what is even that? So I did a little research and got like the full background on it. So yeah, let's get into it. So according to some sources online, early mentions of spontaneous combustion, it's like early mentions of it in the 5th century in medieval Europe. They have like some documented cases. Um, some victims have been found almost completely burned alive, nearby objects left strangled, untouched, or only lightly damaged, greasy, or soot residue on the furniture and walls. And even just by that, I'm like, I need to do a deeper dive into this because this seems like unrealistic. This is something that you see in a movie. Like, people just don't sit there and explode for no reason. Like, why is this a thing? And my biggest thing is, like, when did it stop and when did it start? Because how do people just like randomly explode with no, like, like with no like reason to? Like, did you eat something that you exploded from, or like what is it? So one notable case, I guess, the very first case of this was 1663 in France. The death of, I don't know how to pronounce her name, his or her name, because it doesn't specify gender. So I'm going to try to not butcher this name. I guess it's Polonus Vor. I'm just going to say Polonus because that's the first name. Recorded by a physician named Thomas, and one of the earliest cited as a classic incident. And it still doesn't give full context or full detail of, you know, why. So I guess the second incident happened in 1744 in England, and her name was Countess and was found almost entirely reduced to ashes with her lower legs and part of her head still intact, which is even weirder. Now, scientists really didn't start questioning this phenomenon until around 18th to 20th century. Um, and they came up with a theory, I guess, called alcoholism, a theory that they considered maybe the cause of this. So victims were often reported as heavy drinkers. Some even hypothesized alcohol saturated tissue made the body flammable. This was later debunked. Alcohol doesn't accumulate in tissue that way. So that theory, the alcoholism theory, um, was debunked through the 18th to 19th century. Now, the 20th century, um, they had came up with the wick effect, which basically suggested that the person's clothing would catch fire from an external spark, maybe a candle, a pipe, fireplace, etc., things like that. The body fat acts like a candle's fuel, while the clothing functions like wick. um, allowing slow, nearly complete burning without spreading widely. But that was also debunked at a point in time. It doesn't specify when it was debunked, it was just debunked at a certain time. And then some scientists actually thought it happened through natural explanations like smoking in bed, open flames, poor medical reporting are also believed to account for most cases historically. Um, and that was also debunked. So those weren't, I guess, the cause effect to the reason why everyone was just randomly exploding, which would be like a scary thing to witness. Um, so, alcoholism theory debunked, wick effect debunked, and natural explanations all three were debunked. Um, Now, it wasn't until the 20th and 21st century where we seen the first case of this in America, which was 1951 in St. Petersburg, Florida. Her name was Mary Reeser, was found reduced mostly to ash in her chair with only her foot intact. One of the most famous modern cases. Um, and then there was also two more within the 20th and 21st century. One in 1966 in England, Dr. John Irving Bentley was found burnt to ash in his bathroom, leaving behind only one leg. And another in the US in 1982, the death of Jean Safin, a 61-year-old in London, was reported as well by a witness who saw flames burst from her body. Um, these reports often spiked the public interest through investigators, usually pointing to external sources. So there was a lot of questions that was raised from what exactly is going on and why are people just randomly exploding. And I'm not sure how true it is. It also says in today's time, spontaneous human combustion is not really recognized as a real phenomenon. Instead, if it comes up and it happens again, like in today's time, they'll just say that it was the wick effect or an accidental ignition, like cigarettes or candles or stoves or fireplace. And then they also state that the fact that bone and tissue can be destroyed by long smoldering fires, even at relatively low heat. So I'm not sure if I as long as I've been alive, I never heard someone on the news that it just randomly exploded and they don't know why. But according to some online sources, if it does happen, they'll just say it was the wick effect, mostly. So I did a little bit more digging, and the only case that comes up for, I guess, the early, around the 2000s was 2010, and his name was Michael, he was 76. He was found burnt to death in his home. The coroner listed his death as spontaneous combustion, one of the few official rulings in modern day times. Um, I'm I'm guessing we didn't hear, a lot of us didn't hear about this or didn't know this existed. I mean, the guy was from Ireland. I don't know why this isn't a thing that's, massively talked about. So maybe a lot of house fires or fires in itself, with people involved, being burnt to ash in their home and things like that, was it all, did it happen more? My question is, did it happen more than often? Maybe it's still happening, and, you know, the corners or scientists are just ruling it as, maybe, don't light your candle and fall asleep and leave it. I mean, those fires are obviously, a thing, house fires and stuff like that. But in most cases, do they see it, and then, when they go and investigate, they say, oh, this person was holding a cigarette, or oh, this person had a candle lit, or um, they wore the wrong clothing to bed, and it's like now they, caught on fire and maybe their leg survived. Like the last two I said, one lady foot was fully intact, but everything else was burned. And then the man leg was intact, but then everything else was burned. So like just his leg and not his foot. And then just the lady's foot and nothing else was, survived when she was sitting in a chair. So then it kind of makes you think like, well, it kind of makes me think more deeper into it. Like maybe, like how many, like how many deaths has actually been ruled out by something else, but it was actually just them having spontaneous combustion? And what actually causes it? Like, is it maybe just, the only thing that I can probably think of is probably the acid in our stomach. And it can't be from, I can say, like, okay, maybe it's what you ate that day or something like that. Maybe it's a bunch of things that just, lead up to it. Because also, what I think plays a factor is maybe age. A lot of the victims were, higher in age, other than in 1938 in England was a 22-year-old who suddenly caught fire. Get this, in England, they suddenly caught fire while dancing at a ballroom. Witness claims flames burst from her dress and she died from her injuries. So, the only time I've seen this, whether it's in movies or TV shows or anything like that, was vampires just bursting into flames when they hit like the sun from the inside out. And you really don't see things like this with like regular humans or people witnessing it and things like that. And no one, even when you have actual witnesses, they don't actually talk about it. I have never seen someone talk about this, which I wanted to, make a video about it because it's so fascinating to me that this actually exists. Um, and certain patterns, I know I can't even say patterns because I tried to say that maybe they were older, but like I said, there was a 22-year-old that it happened to, and many cases, a lot of the coroners normally say that it was clothing, like by her basically igniting on the dance floor, which is wild to me, and people witnessing, everything just her catching on fire from the inside out, and then she died, which, you know, they ruled it out as just her clothing, or the type of clothing she was wearing, or, for other cases where they were found alone, they make up their own, you know, theory of what happened by just looking around. So you walk in, see someone completely in ash, and maybe you see a candle in the corner, and then you say, hey, the candle was lit, the candle did it. Or, but the whole house isn't burnt down. You just walk in and someone's in complete ash where everything in the house is fully intact. And this person is in complete ash as if, you know, they were the only thing that caught on fire and everything else was still intact. And I'm kind of taken back by the fact that they never really got to the bottom of why it happens. And I'm thinking, the more I think about it, the more I think that maybe it's more on a scientific level with in our stomach acids, maybe. Because if I think about it, if it has anything to do with like stomach acid or something like that, wouldn't you just vomit or like burn? Because I know from not too much research, but I know like from some understanding that the acid in our stomach is very acidic, and we have certain things that like line our stomach to where so our acid in our stomach can't burn through our stomach. It kind of like protects us and things like that. So maybe, I don't know, I'd maybe be reaching with that one, but I just can't accept the fact that in many cases, candles or smoking or burst pipes or wearing different clothing can cause you to literally explode right where you're sitting or standing, either alone or in front of everyone with no explanation. So, like, you just pass away and no one have no recollection of how you passed away. You just, uh, how did Billy pass away? Oh, I don't know. He just burst into flames in front of the entire family. Oh, okay. Mm, what now? You know? And then 9 times out of 10, the investigators will, investigate the situation and just put it off as maybe he was a smoker or drinker or something like that. But ever since, what I did read in my notes was ever since um, all of the other theories that they came up out of all of the other theories they came up with, the alcoholism theory, the wick effect theory, and the natural explanation theory. The alcoholism theory was between the 18th and 19th century. They debunked that so much so that even if things like this will happen to this day, they will always pick the wick effect, and that's what I got from the way that they investigate. So, candle, pipe, fireplace, cigarette, clothing, um, yeah, your bones heating up from the inside out, burning without spreading widely. So they will rule anything basically that will catch you on fire, but not the entire house, which, I've seen videos where um, candle fire spread and like the whole house is like everything just burns up. So I don't even know why that one isn't ruled out as well. Um, yeah, it just doesn't make any sense. as far as the explanation goes as to why are people, or why were people, and not even just why were people, is it still happening today? You know, like, as many deaths, if you sit and think, as many deaths dealing with fire or burn victims that have occurred, how many did they rule to the public that yes, this was a candle fire, or this person, was smoking a cigarette and this happened? But in actuality, did they have a spontaneous combustion situation? It kind of makes you like, well, I don't know about you, but it kind of makes me like think like, hmm, is it still happening? I mean, the last case that they kind of, had thought about it being spontaneous was 2010 in Ireland, and it happened, count 3 times in America, 2 or 3 times. One in Petersburg, Florida, and one in Pennsylvania, and both happened in the mid 1900s. One was 1951, and one was 1951 was Florida, and 1966 was Pennsylvania. And since then, 2010 was the last report, but that was in Ireland. So it only happened maybe twice in America, and never was reported like that again. So maybe they had like some kind of, you know, meeting, or maybe they just came to conclusion that, hey, we're just going to rule these things out as the wick effect and call it like that. Call it what it is. It, you know, because it kind of doesn't make sense to me at all. So, my final thought on this, I just like to say, I guess spontaneous human combustion is like almost certainly not a supernatural thing or an unknown physical phenomenon, but it definitely remains one of the most striking examples of unusual, mysterious events. And it's definitely something that scientists have not completed and has been super incomplete. And it literally, when it come across people um, who find out about things like this, it can spark like imagination, definitely. And it also makes you think that, well, quick thought that just popped in my head, maybe they hide these things from us because maybe people would be more terrified to just burst into flames. Who knows? That's definitely a mystery that will always be mysterious to me because there's no explanation for it. But I definitely would like to recommend a list of books, maybe documentaries, and some case studies on this. Larry E. Arnold um, has a book titled Ablaze that was released 1995, a modern paranormal focus book. Um, may involve some couple mysteries about this. There's some documentaries and some specials as well, unsolved mysteries. Unexplained Files, and the National Geographic Is It Real from 2005 cases. Um, Certain case studies to do like a deeper dive definitely would be the Mary Reeser case from 1951 in St. Petersburg, and it's one of the most publicized modern cases. Um, and definitely the Dr. Arving Bentley case, 1966 in Pennsylvania. Um, he was famous for the left, the leg left behind case. Sorry. Also, the Jean Safin case in 1982 in London, when eyewitnesses claimed flames erupted from her body spontaneously. And also Michael Furty case, which was the latest case in 2010. Well, the latest case that they, I would say, ruled out as a spontaneous combustion case in Ireland. Officers ruled it a death as a rare in modern times and really didn't pick up from that. They just left it at that. So, yeah. So, I just want to thank you guys for listening to another episode of me rambling on and on about another one of my strange, mysterious mysteries that just have been mind boggling to me and just has been on my mind. And I could not stop thinking about it. So I just had to record this. And I just love these little episodes that I've kind of start recording and created, because a lot of stuff that I be having questions about surrounding like mysteries and unsolved cases and creepy things and paranormal things. Um, it's good to like record it, talk about it, and write down notes and things like that. So I want to thank you for listening to another episode of the Mysterious One podcast. I think I'm getting used to calling it a podcast because I was like, I don't want to call it a podcast. I don't want to call it a podcast. So I'm kind of getting used to it now. So yeah, this has been another episode of the Mysterious One podcast. Another mystery awaits. Will you be there to uncover it? Subscribe, like, and comment. Don't forget to turn on your post notifications so you be notified every single time I post. And I thank you if you did subscribe and support it. Thank you in advance. And I thank you all for listening. And once again, I'll see you in the dark.